Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Femi Sumanu. I'd like to welcome you to our second lecture in the Arenicon lecture series. Some of you may have already been to the first one, but for those of you who this is your first time, just a little bit about the series. Arenicon is derived from the Greek as meaning a proposition harmonizing different viewpoints, which is what we hope to do today. The series is about having a different kind of conversation about the African continent from the perspectives of leaders who are actually involved in shaping that future. And we hope that we can also serve as a platform for debate about that future. Now, given our title, it's important to note that Africa is not a monolith. It is not a singular entity, as is sometimes presented in the media. It's indeed a continent of 54 countries with almost 3,000 languages. Nigeria alone has 500 languages, just about. And if you compare that in the most recent census with India, with its 1.2 billion people, India has about 150 languages, which shows you that Africa is indeed a diverse continent. And it's important that our expert panel today will be reflecting that. We believe that the topic today is a timely and a timeless one. It's no secret that Africa sorely needs greatly increased levels of quality of economic development. Africa is the second most populated continent, with about 1 billion people of the world's 7 billion, making up 15% of the world's population. Yet, Africa only contributes less than 2% of global GDP and represents only 1% of the world total banking assets. There's no doubt or disagreement that African economies have to grow, and the question is, how best do we do that? And which is what we'll be discussing today. It is an important question, and if recent trends continue, by 2040, Africa will be home to 1 in 5, or 20% of the planet's young people. Now this presents an opportunity, but it also presents a great challenge. These young people will need to be fed, they will need to be clothed, they need education, they need access to quality healthcare, they have to be assured decent standards of living, and they need the requisite infrastructure to make their lives and movements safe and indeed comfortable. All of these issues and imperatives center on economic development. Now, thankfully, the inputs are there for Africa. The mineral resource wealth in Africa is astounding. Africa's share of the world's total amount of uncultivated arable land, so that's uncultivated arable land, is 60%. And this, for one, explains Malam Sanusi's insistence on the importance of agriculture to Africa's development, more about which I'm sure he will speak today. 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world in 2000 to 2010 were African. It's important to remember, though, that after the independence wave in the 60s, Africa had 4 or 5 lost decades, which were punctuated with war, interruptions to democracy, and low productivity in general. So when we look at that, you also have to put the relatively high growth in these 2000s in proper perspective. It's been growth from a very low base, and thus it's been easy growth. Now we are at a point where the hard part is here. The hard part needs to be earned, and it needs to be earned by being very serious about economic development. The part where, this is the part where we're supposed to overhaul our governance practices and systems and formulate and implement the policies of transformative, sustainable economic growth. And our distinguished panel is here to tell us just how to do that, no pressure. I'd like to introduce our moderator, China Danforth Oyemelukwe, who oversees, he's the MD responsible for Africa coverage across various products at Goldman Sachs in London. He has 20 years of emerging markets experience across capital markets and investment banking. Prior to joining Goldman Sachs, China was the MD CEO of Zenith Capital in Nigeria. And before that, he worked at Merrill Lynch, initially in New York and subsequently in London, at Merrill Lynch Capital Markets. He began his career in Nigeria as a credit analyst at Chase Merchant Bank, and he holds a BSc in economics from the University of Benin, an MSc in international finance from the London School of Economics, and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Just briefly, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. One of our respondents is Professor Paul Collier, the Professor of Economics and Director of the Center for the Study of African Economies at Oxford. His Excellency, Mr. Geratu, Ambassador to the UK and Ireland from Eritrea. And our keynote speaker is Malam Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria since June of 2009. Now, before I hand over to China, I'd just like to give some ground rules for the Q&A session at the end of our speakers' talks. We urge you to remember that the questions should be asked in a respectful manner, and questions and comments should be kept brief, please. And also just to remember that only those who are on the stage are allowed to give speeches today. We also ask, actually, that all opinions here today are respected and due courtesy is given to all questions, comments today. And now I'd like to hand you over to China.
Thank you very much, Remy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here. I think Femi did a very good job of introducing what this is all about at the high level. I think the first thing I want to do is give a more detailed introduction of our distinguished respondents and speakers. I will start in reverse order from the order in which they'll be speaking. So our second respondent is Professor Paul Collier, who is familiar, I'm sure, to many of you in this room. He's, I can say, a friend of Africa, and has had a long and distinguished career in development economics in general, and with respect to Africa specifically. He's the Professor of Economics and Director of the Center of Study of African Economics at Oxford University. Between 1998 and 2003, he was the Director of the Research Development Department of the World Bank, and was also a distinguished informal speaker at Sciences Po in Paris. His research covers numerous topics: fragile states, democratization, management of natural resources in low-income societies, and he's the author of numerous books, many of which I've read. I can't say I've read all of them, but close to all of them, including The Bottom Billion, which in 2008/2009 won the Lionel Gerber Prize, the Arthur Ross Prize, Corrigan Prizes, and in May 2009 was the joint winner of the Estoril Global Issues Distinguished Book Prize. His second book, which I found fascinating, Wars, Guns, and Votes, Democracy in Dangerous Places, was published in March 2009, and his latest book, you have to love the titles, they're better than fiction titles. His latest book, The Plundered Planet, How to Reconcile Prosperity with Nature, was published in May 2010. Professor Collier is currently advisor to the Strategy and Policy Department of the IMF and advisor to the Africa region of the World Bank. In 2008, he was, very meritoriously, appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE, for services to scholarship and development. And in 2011, he was elected to the Council of the Royal Economic Society. Can I please invite you, Professor Collier, to join us on stage? Our second respondent is His Excellency Ambassador Geratu, Ambassador for Eritrea to the United Kingdom and Ireland since 2007. We've had quite a few chats, Ambassador. So the Ambassador actually has had a very interesting career. Apart from being a diplomat, he's also the Director General for the Department of General Education within the Ministry of Education in Eritrea. So he's an educationist and a diplomat, and those two skills combined are quite a powerful force. The ambassador is a very strong advocate. Those of you who know the history of Ethiopia and Eritrea will know it's been an interesting history, to put it mildly, with a lot of passion on both sides. The ambassador was a very staunch advocate for the full independence of his homeland, and he participated in the Eritrean national liberation struggle as a member of the EPLF, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. In May 1991, the EPLF took control of Eritrea. A UN-supervised referendum was held in April 1993, and over 99.99%, if such a thing is achievable, voted in favor of independence, with a turnout of over 90%. I have many Eritrean friends, and I've followed the story of Eritrea for years, and I've always found it fascinating how passionate the Eritrean people are, and how much of a sense of identity they have, a distinct and distinguished identity. The ambassador is very vocally outspoken on the risks of foreign economic influence on the African continent, and a champion for investment in education in Eritrea, but also in Africa as a whole. And I think you'll find that he has very interesting things to say. Your Excellency, if I can invite you to please join us on stage. And our keynote speaker, one could always say, of course, he needs no introduction, but he must be introduced. Our keynote speaker is Malam Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. It may seem like I'm struggling for words when I want to introduce the governor, because I've heard him talk so many times at different events. I've had minor debates with him myself. Obviously, I've been very close to developments since he took over at the central bank. So the first thing I want to say before I formally start introducing him, that the central bank governor is a man who I have the highest respect for his courage and his passion about development, which is why I think it is it's perfect that he should be speaking today on the topic of development, because over the years, anyone who has followed his career and listened to him speak knows that he has very strong opinions, but they're very deeply held, and he thinks very carefully, long and hard about what happens to, quote unquote, the common man and woman, which is really the essence of development at the end of the day. But I'll give you his bio, which many of you know already. Malam Sanusi earned bachelor's and master's degrees in economics from Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. Also has a first-class degree in Sharia and Islamic studies from the African International University in Khartoum, Sudan. The governor actually worked as a lecturer in Ahmadu Bello University, where he taught economics, which, for those of you who didn't know that before, will enlighten you as to why his thinking is very, very rigorous. And I don't say this just to flatter the governor. I say this because you find in debates and discussion with him that he thinks very rigorously, which is key, as you'll find as we talk today. He joined the banking industry in 1985 at Icon, Merchant Bankers. For the younger ones of you in the room, you won't remember Icon, but Icon actually was, at the time, probably the most respected merchant bank. Governor, you won't know, but I actually applied for a youth court at Icon, and I got turned down. So they were taking people like the governor. I wasn't good enough, so I went to Chase. His banking career, is well known. He was at the United Bank of Africa, and then subsequently First Bank of Nigeria, where he rose to become the group managing director before being appointed the central bank governor in June 2009. What can I say about the governor? He's a prolific writer. Many of his papers have been published in academic journals, books, and newspapers around the world. He's been conferred with the National Award of Commander of the Order of the Nigeria, CON, by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and has won numerous awards. Most recently, or I should say most, I won't even say most notably, but I'll say most recently, he was named Forbes Africa Person of the Year in 2011. I was present that night at Echo Hotel, upstairs at the top. He was also listed by Time magazine as one of the most 100 influential people in the world. I think that's a statement of the obvious to me. And also, he was awarded Global Central Bank Governor of the Year, 2010, by the Banker magazine, a publication of the Financial Times. I was fortunate enough to be at the dinner ceremony in London again. So, without much further ado, I think one could take up the whole evening speaking about the governor, but I won't, because it's actually much more interesting to hear him speak. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the governor to please come and take his place on the podium. So I'm going to say a few words on our topic tonight, but really I want to have our speakers and our respondents speak because they're the people you came here to hear. Neither the Washington or Beijing consensus, a new developmental paradigm. It's a big topic. Now, from my vantage point at Goldman Sachs, I could tell you that Africa, on a per capita weighted basis, on a GDP weighted basis, is currently the hottest investment destination in the world. Every single investor of every type, all the way from portfolio investors, private equity investors, foreign direct investors, whether they be corporates or banks, asset managers, pension funds, everyone wants to invest in Africa. Now, of course, Africa is a continent, it's not a country. And there's different levels of focus, for different countries. There's a huge variety, as Femi was saying, between countries. We have over 10,000 cultures in Africa, if you really dig down into the substratum between not just languages, but tribes and cultures. So there's a huge variety between countries in terms of their resources, in terms of their attractiveness. But as a whole, I can tell you that Africa is the #1 investment destination of the world. Now, what does that mean? Well, it has a lot of implications because these potential capital flows need to be managed. And part of our challenge as Africans is not only what do we do with those capital flows, but what do we do internally in the sense of making our economies ready to be receptive. And when I say receptive, I don't mean just in the terms of welcoming, but it means in the terms of being able to manage inflows as they come in and also manage our own internal reserves, budgets, and then all the developmental challenges that come up: education, agriculture, small-scale business. So many issues to discuss. You could ask the question, do we need a paradigm? Maybe we don't. I'm sure the governor will have his thoughts on that as well. So it's a big topic, and what I'd like to do is first start off by letting our keynote speaker start. Malam Sanusi, as you all know, his reforms of the Nigerian banking system are historic. They're well known to all of you, so I won't go through them. But he has also done something which is very interesting, which is to spearhead the steering of the bank into a more central role in the real economy, both by moral suasion and by actual physical acts of promoting financing to different real sectors. And this is a very bold step, but it's an essential step. And as he'll tell you, if someone has to do something, and if not the central bank, who? This is the question. So he has taken the central bank into a very active role in generally promoting economic development, like both direct and indirect methods, and spends a lot of time on this, as I can tell you. So for instance, to solve the value chain problem that he believes inhibits growth in the agricultural sector, he has very strong views on the agricultural sector. The governor will talk about his views on economic development in Nigeria, in Africa, and frankly, anything else he wants to talk about, because whatever he says is always fascinating. Please, Governor, if I can invite you.